Welcome back. On today's show, Hooked, we've been discussing how people become addicts. And joining us are best friends and founders of Addictive Daughter, Persia and Joey. Welcome first. Hi. Welcome, guys. So you guys founded Addictive Daughter in order to help people with addictive personalities kind of have a positive outlook on life. Can you tell us a little bit about your lifestyle before you chose to improve your lives?
Sure, yeah. So we come from very different backgrounds. Persia is from a family, her parents are actually recovered addicts. Mm-hmm. So you sort of were raised with active addiction.
Yeah, so my parents were addicts of alcohol and drugs when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And then they became sober when I was about 16. But the first 16 years of my life, obviously, there'd been a lot of turbulence, a lot of anxiety and fear of not knowing what was going on at home. But then when they became sober, I found that I became quite self-destructive, actually, particularly in relationships. Had quite unhealthy relationships, kept dating guys who had problems with drugs or drug dealers as well. And then I met Joey when I went to drama school.
So we were early 20s. And for me, my background was much more stable. My parents don't have any sort of drug or alcohol addiction at all. But I think for me, and Persia sort of in our early 20s, it was much more, we were in a place where we'd come out of drama school together. We weren't working, we were going out with men who did have drug and alcohol problems. So we were finding ourselves in destructive relationships, out of work, and I think just sort of circumstantial depression, feeling really low. And both of us found ourselves reaching for drugs, men, alcohol, shopping, food, all sorts of things just to try and make ourselves feel better, to numb what it was we were really feeling.
Yeah, it was a sense of escapism, really.
Yeah. We were discussing earlier in the show the different theories about addiction, and one theory is that addiction is a learned behavior. Another is that it's something that we're born with. Which theory do you kind of, are you inclined towards?
I would actually think it's a mixture of both of them. I think there are certain people who are more susceptible or predisposed to having addiction issues, people who may be very impulsive, risk takers, or people who've had really hard struggles in their life growing up, perhaps, and it's a way of numbing out and distracting themselves from that pain. But I think, so people, it can be genetically inherited, I think. When you look at a lot of families, my parents, had addiction running throughout their families, the more you look back.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is that nature-nurture thing of, does it run in the bloodline, or is it because you were raised by those people? So that's the behaviour that you saw and you experienced your whole life. I think it's different for everyone, and personal experience, people will have differing opinions on it, for sure. But I mean, for a lot of people we know, I think it's a mixture of the both. And it's at some point in your life, if you're struggling and you can't deal with the feelings that are coming up, just trying to push down those emotions with a temporary fix.
So, why do you think so many young women in their 20s going through quarter-life crisis?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think one of the things is the time we live in, modern life. About 40, 50 years ago, the age that women were getting married at was roughly 23, and now it's 33. So essentially, it's great that women have this decade to play with, and there's so many more choices available to us. But I think that also puts a lot of pressure on us, because we think, what if I, chose this thing and I should have gone down the other avenue and I've made the wrong decision? And we're just constantly bombarded with social media. So we're comparing our, our insides and our reality with other people's kind of fake personas that we all put out. And so we constantly feel like we're not good enough. And I think it's a really hard thing for women today.
Hugely. And also, we live in a society that fetishizes external things. So everything, the billboards are about fashion and beauty, the technology that you ought to be owning. It's all about the outer, alcohol brands, it's everywhere. So we believe, I think, as a society, that they are the solutions that we need to turn to when we're not feeling good. We buy things to make us feel better rather than going within.
I completely agree, and I think this is why I'm passionate about our show, because I think our show focuses on the inside rather than the external. We try and bring a message across where people can understand that, the most work needs to be put towards strengthening and towards empowering your internal and not your external. 100%. So I completely agree. And now, with you, and you've shared a little bit about your story before you turned your life around. When did you recognize that, you know, your behavior and what you did was addictive, that you guys had addictive personalities?
Okay, so it started for us in 2012 was sort of the big year. You know, everyone has that year where it was just like, wow, that year was horrific.
2010.
2010, sorry.
Yeah.
Addictive Daughter was founded in 2012. 2010 was the year where we just both were spiralling down at such a rate. And luckily we were in it together, actually, which was the fortunate thing.
Together, yeah.
We were living together. And
our two best friends outside of our friendship happened to become kind of Hollywood stars overnight, and that was really difficult for us because we were used to kind of doing well and being straight A students, and suddenly
these two girls that were really close to us were doing exceptionally well. Yeah. It was a really unusual situation to be in, and we just didn't deal with it well at all. Just to throw in, we don't call ourselves addicts. We definitely can take ownership of having addictive personalities, but where we found ourselves in 2010 were kind of borderline is that we weren't bad enough to be seeking rehab help, you know. So it was sort of this self-perpetuating thing that was gradually getting worse, but not drastic enough for extreme measures. And it took us a couple of years, like I said. So 2010 was when things started to get very rocky, and then it was then in 2012 in the summer that we really took stock of where we were, and it really came off the back of two relationships that we'd been in with addicts who were sober and in recovery, and they dumped us. It was an unfortunate situation of being dumped and cheated on by these two guys. We actually weren't talking at the time at all. We got back in touch with each other, and I think we saw for the first time very clearly we can go back into the same patterns of finding another man and going out and getting drunk, or we can do something different. And armed with each other and a little bit of knowledge that we'd accumulated about addictive behaviour along the way, we decided to make a change.
I think what was really interesting as well about it is, you know, I had two parents who were addicts. I had seen them go into rehab, and it was still oblivious to me that I was really not in a good place. And it was oblivious. I was able to hide all the really self-destructive behaviour, any drug taking, the amount of drinking, really bad relationships. But I actually did an acting job in 2010 in China, and I put on 2 stone in 2 months, which is quite an achievement. And I came back, and obviously my parents could spot that, because that was the one addiction, the eating, and I wasn't sleeping, I was drinking a lot of beer, that you could see, okay, there's a problem. And I think in a way that was a blessing, because that enabled, my dad took me away to Thailand, and just like we went on this health retreat, and he said to me, if you focus on the insides, the outsides will take care of themselves. And it was from that point, you know, that has been kind of our message of Addictive Daughter. It's the message of our new book, The Inner Fix. If you focus on the insides, the outsides will take care of themselves. So instead of, you know, a quick new diet or a new relationship, we started to look at who we were and why we were making these choices. And I think, you know, the key is we were self-destructive because we felt bad about ourselves, and we felt bad about ourselves because we were self-destructive. So it became about learning to love ourselves, really.
And, you know, when we look at addiction, and we have people who are watching us who maybe are going through a predisposition to addiction, they are beginning a downward spiral. People may be focusing on things that are rather obvious, like drugs and things. You mentioned eating. What are sort of the odd addictions that are not so obvious that people should look out, that you've come across with Addictive Daughter? What would you say?
There are so many. So I think the number one thing to say is anything that you feel you've got a dependence on or an attachment to, it can be considered something that you're, you know, using addictively to manage your feelings. And I mean, we see lots of different cases through Addictive Daughter, but I think social media is one of the biggest things for young women. Just constantly being on your phone, checking, making sure that people are liking, that your life looks good, and that people are approving of you and in contact with you. I think that's a huge one. I think for a lot of women, shopping, control around food. It might not necessarily be overeating, but controlling calorie, calorie counting, or being very, very obsessive about what you're allowing, you know, gluten-free, dairy-free, all these sugar-free. There's so many things nowadays that I think society tells us we ought to be doing. And a lot of what we write about in The Inner Fix is actually, what do you need to be doing? What's good for you? Because yes, you might be dairy-free, and that might be a decision that you need to make in a lifestyle choice that's going to work for your body, but do it for the right reasons. Don't do it because society's putting these expectations on you.
And you can always ask yourself, You know, am I doing this out of punishment? Am I punishing myself and acting cruelly to myself, or am I doing this out of love? So that's the thing. I think the difficult thing with exercise and healthy eating is you know, at least with something like drinking, you can kind of, it's more of a destructive thing generally.
But you can easily identify that it's bad.
So for you know, alcoholics who are in something like Alcoholics Anonymous, that, you know, you're having a good day if you don't pick up a drink that day. It's not as easy, because with food and relationships and exercise, you know, these things are good things, but we can self-sabotage them, and we can act really destructively with them. So I think that's what's really helped us, is to ask ourselves, when we're eating or exercising, am I doing this lovingly, or am I punishing myself and being cruel to myself?
So what I wanted to ask also is, how do you help women tackle these issues like the self-esteem? Because I believe it sort of boils down to that as well. It plays a part. So how do you help them with this?
Well, in our book, The Inner Fix, it's kind of structured in 3 ways, and we do life coaching as well. And it's kind of, this structure is what takes someone who's in an unhappy place, like we were, into essentially feeling better about themselves and their lives. And it starts off with identifying what the problem is, what you're struggling with, and getting clear on why. You know, why are you drinking every night or every weekend, to, you know, binge drinking, blacking out, having one-night stands perhaps? Why do you feel that you're overeating so much? Whatever that thing is for you. And often it's looking about, you know, going back to childhood. What things have you not really dealt with or looked at from your childhood? We all have things. Maybe you were bullied. Maybe your parents got divorced. Something that, you know, was really difficult for you. And once the people we're life coaching start to identify the why that they're struggling in the first place, it makes a huge difference. And then you move on to, you know, the solution, which is learning to love yourself and healing and getting honest with yourself and clear, so you can look at, you know, how can I live in a more healthy, loving way?
I think awareness, like you said, is absolutely key. And also willingness to change as well. You know, you're not going to make the changes unless you really, really want to. And it is difficult, and you will feel uncomfortable and you'll be challenged. But if you really, truly want to, I believe you can do anything if you really put your mind to it, you know. So, but it's getting to that point, and I think with any lifestyle change, you've got to have conviction. And yeah, it's all about what you mentioned about self-esteem. It's all the inside stuff. You know, we look at celebrity culture, and they've got everything. They've got money, they've got recognition, success, and yet a lot of celebrities are really unhappy, which for us just demonstrates it's not about what's outside. You know, it's what's going on in here.
So you've mentioned your book, The Inner Fix, and someone who picks up your book, what do they have to look forward to? Give us a quick overview. You don't need to give away your secrets. You don't need to give away your secrets. We'll get the book in order to find out more in detail, but just a quick overview of what your book is about.
Sure. So I would say, firstly, it's very practical. So it's got lots of sort of tips, very practical tips and exercises that you can engage in. One of the things I think we're most excited and a little bit scared about is the fact that we have shared quite a lot of, very personal anecdotes from our own lives. So it was an interesting writing process in terms of choosing what we were, you know, comfortable with putting out there. And actually, I think we both realised the things that we most wanted to keep back were the things we knew ultimately were going to be of most use for people and most helpful to read. So it's a very exposing and a very honest book about our experiences as young women and 20s.
And it's structured, as I mentioned, in 3 parts. So it starts with the problem, and you look at the different areas of your life that you're struggling with. Then it goes to the middle part, is the solution, and that changes your perspective about everything that you're struggling with in life. And that we actually talk about how the Chinese word for crisis is made up of 2 characters. One symbolises danger and the other opportunity. And I think that a lot of women in their 20s, they hit kind of 25, they don't know what they're doing in their life, they're feeling really fearful, they're not feeling good about who they are, where they're going, and they feel a sense of a life crisis. And it's about going, actually, this is a really good thing, because the 20s are the launch pad to the rest of our lives, and the decisions we make in them do matter. And so if you're having this early on, it gets you to look at your life and go, right, what do I want? Where do I want to go? And the last part of our book is called The Future, and we look at, you know, your relationship with your body, love, money, work, everything really. And so it's really practical, as Joey mentioned, and you can kind of get really clear about where do I want to go? And it's quite exciting.
Yeah, that sounds really, really great. Thank you so much, Persia and Joey, for joining us and shedding a light on such an important topic. It was really fun having you in studio and very informative. Yeah. So that's it, guys. We're going to take a break, and after the break, we're going to continue with our topic, Hooked.